It's always a great pleasure to speak here at the Coalition for Peace Action under the ever-hopeful, ever-dynamic Bob Moore and Irene Goldman, who keep the fires burning at times when others let some of those fires go out. So they are long-distance runners, and this whole organization is, and I can just feel the wonderful vitality in this room as you honor these splendid people, and that's a joy for me to see. And I might add that it's a particular honor to be introduced by Frank von Hippel, who in my opinion is one of the few wise men of the United States. Careful up here on this small podium. As I was noting to Frank, I've got the recycling on the back and the speech on the front. I don't want to give you the recycling. I want to give you the speech. So I'm going to have to carefully turn the pages over as I go along. Anyway, my topic will be the new shape of the nuclear danger that's taken today, that Mr. Uri fought so hard to alleviate for us. So he's in the back of my mind now as I speak. But I want to begin by talking about an aspect that I think just stands front and center whenever we consider this issue, but that is often not addressed or not quite fully addressed. And that is the fact that present company notwithstanding, so very few people, to be perfectly brutally blunt about it, are thinking about our issue. And sometimes if there's some proliferation somewhere, people will think about it for a while, and then the interest dies down again. So I think a very peculiar situation has arisen. We've known for more than 60 years that there's no city on Earth that can't be destroyed by a nuclear weapon of the appropriate size, and some of them even have little dials on the side, so you could adjust the blast sort of disgustingly. That the number of states around the world that possesses them is rising, that the danger of a bomb or bomb materials to slip into the hands of a terrorist group is mounting, and we know all these things. And they constitute, I don't hesitate to say, in their immediacy and sweep, the gravest danger that the world faces, and certainly that the United States faces. There's stiff competition now for that dubious honor, but I still would dare say that. Even the Republicans, by the way, who might say that terrorism is the greatest danger, sort of in a certain backhand way, are perhaps passing over this larger danger. But that's something else I will get into later. And yet at the same time, the whole issue has passed out of public view. And honestly, it's acquired a kind of musty air. And if you raise the subject, all too often people tend to react as if you're talking of something that was perhaps a problem 25 years ago, but that now is sort of passé. And the current state of opinion is even stranger than that, because if you take the trouble to ask a politician, let's say a presidential candidate, what are the greatest dangers facing the United States, they will probably come up with this. They'll probably mention a terrorist bomb in an American city. Certainly in 2004, both John Kerry and George Bush did that in one of their debates. And actually, although nobody bothered to notice it, what with all the sniper fire in Bosnia and the bitter comment and so on of Obama and so forth that preoccupies, there actually was a moment in the debate in New Hampshire when Charles Gibson asked the two Democratic candidates about the issue. And they gave quite thoughtful responses, but that was not newsworthy. That had no legs. There was no buzz. There was no feeding frenzy. It absolutely sank like a stone. And this is what I'm talking about. So it's a very peculiar state of affairs. And I think we need to ask ourselves, why has this fog rolled in over our subject? And perhaps if we analyze it a little bit, we could find a way through that fog. And so I'm going to talk about that first, and then I'm going to have a word or two to say about the substance of the danger as it exists right now. Now, obviously, over the decades, people have just loved not to think about nuclear war. That's quite understandable. I share it entirely. It's a very, very human reaction to a most horrible topic. But I think that there are some other less innocent or praiseworthy reasons for burying this interest than our natural repugnance to it. And I think one reason is that we've tended to tell ourselves the wrong story about our country, at least since the end of the Cold War. We've lacked self-knowledge. We've misinterpreted ourselves and our place in the world. And you'll recall that at the end of the Cold War, we dubbed ourselves the sole superpower, and French foreign minister even called us a hyperpower. And some began to talk about us actually as a global imperial master. This was not conservatives only or neocons. I remember there were many liberal hawks speaking in the same way. You know, in times gone by, the idea of U.S. imperialism used to be an epithet that was hurled by the left at our government, but suddenly it became a term of praise in the mouths of the right wing. Now, I think that this was a profound misreading of history, brought on by both the corruption and the arrogance of power. For it's not just individuals, actually, but I think whole countries that can be corrupted by power. And it seemed that we had decided that in the 20th century, the biggest powers had sort of fought it out, and we had won, as if we were the only ones left standing after a big boxing match that had gone on for most of the century. And therefore, we had fitted ourselves, in a certain sense, to be the master of the world. My own view is diametrically opposite to that, because I think what was really going on was that all of the great empires, the British, the French, even the Soviet, and ones we never think of, like the Portuguese and the Dutch and so on, had all gone under the waves of history, one after the other. And I think what they really faced was the buzzsaw of popular resistance by local people who turned out to be incredibly powerful in their own countries. So it wasn't a case of one superpower beating out the others. It was sort of like all the 10 pins going down and leaving one sort of tottering in place. So it was just, in my opinion, an epic misunderstanding of our place in the world to think that we were such a superpower. Now, why do I mention that? It's because in the drama, in the story, or as people say these days, the narrative of the sole superpower, nuclear danger really had no place. We were super powerful, not super vulnerable. And in this story, the bomb was sort of like a character that walked in from the wrong drama. It had no place. We didn't know how to think about it or account for it. You remember that book, The End of History, by Francis Fukuyama, that came out around the end of the Cold War. I remember when I saw that on the shelf, I thought, well, at last somebody's talking about nuclear weapons again, right? Because what can really end history but nuclear weapons? Well, it turned out, instead he was talking about this triumph of American values and the American way of life that was really representing the zeitgeist and the forces of history. So I think that when 9/11 came along, it sort of terribly disrupted this sense of our own sort of almost complacent dominance that we felt under the Clinton years. And it turned out that our vulnerability was revealed in a flash, and it didn't take a genius to see that if the weapons at the World Trade Center had not been planes, but nuclear weapons, we would have had a very different story. And of course, that's what the Iraq War was about. In other words, suddenly the danger was there. There are people out there that have the nuclear weapons. We didn't bother to notice that we had any. And so we set out to smash them, to crush them.